I'm Joshua Baltzell. I've been at Kaiser for 10 years now. I'm the head instructor for the pre-physical therapy program here at Kaiser University in Sarasota. I have a degree in education, master's degree in education. I have a bachelor's of science degree in human performance and fitness, emphasis on strength and conditioning, and minors in biology and coaching. I've interned with Pittsburgh Pirates. I worked with the Seattle Mariners. I ran cross country and track all throughout college and high school and things like that. So that's kind of my education and my sporting background.
Okay, I guess that's me. My name is Martin Perez. I'm the captain of the Smash team. I have at least, oh my God, what am I, 14 years of experience of Smash from my father. Because he was a champion back in Mexico, and he actually was a kind of player. I'm going to Kaiser for the nursing program, and yeah, that's pretty much all I really have to share about myself. So my question is, when and why players choke under pressure the most, and like what leads up to that situation?
Okay, it's a great question. And when we actually look at choking within any sport or anything like that, it's usually the interpretation that a person has that's attached to the experience or the event that they're actually doing. What I mean by that is when we look at it, how much pressure does the actual person put on themselves before they start or while they're actually doing it? And to even go farther, it's actually just the thought process they have. You've probably been in it where you've actually played a game and everything seemed to be just working perfectly. The flow, that's really what it is. And you've been in it probably multiple times. When you're actually in it, are you thinking about anything? Is the question.
Oh my gosh, I'm mostly thinking about the player I'm against right now at that one moment. Yeah, it's just it's never really anything outside of it. It's just whatever's in the zone at that moment.
And that's really what happens when we actually want to do an event or anything like that, is we want to get into the flow, but we want to actually let our mind and our body actually just take over, where you're almost anticipating. And even in yours, if you would probably explain the flow for you, it's I'm anticipating what the next person's doing, and it seems like you're three events or three moves ahead of the person. And that's the stage that we want to get into. When we actually look at somebody that chokes or crashes or anything like that, what tends to happen is their focus gets out of focus, if you will. Too many things are actually coming in, and if you have too many sensories or anything like that are actually coming in, or if you have too many thought processes that are coming in, now you're actually taking away from where it needs to be. And this is what tends to happen. What could happen, what might happen, that's the ideas that start to creep in on the people. And if you start to have those ideas or those thoughts creep in, then well, what could happen? What might happen? And then there's doubt. And when we have the doubt, that's when our body will almost shut down, and that's where the crash will happen. So it's almost an interpretation that we have of just different stimuli that are actually around us.
Okay, I think what I'm getting from this is like overstimulation is essentially what like halts the zone, because I would imagine there's like maybe a new experience they probably didn't know or recognize it. Like I think I actually had a game with one of my players recently. We were in like losers finals, and I had something similar to what you're saying, where I wasn't focusing. It was a whole new scenario. I was on the ledge. Essentially, when you're in the ledge in this game, it's very hard to get out of disadvantage. And my character that I play, when he's in disadvantage, is very rough. So when I was experiencing this new situation that I've never witnessed, it was just like that. I was just canceled out because I was so focused. And then once it hit me, it was that realization. I went back to reality. Yeah. And then I just essentially the game was over. I saw what happened, and then it was just like processing, and then I felt very tired afterwards.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to is, and you were probably in that situation where it was a disadvantage and you were thinking about all those things, but then you realized that, well, it's no different really than what you've been through a lot of other times. You probably practiced it, you probably been through all that stuff, and that's when it just became second nature again. And that's what you want to get to, is where it already is second nature, that you don't have to think about it or you don't have to contemplate, because really when we look at it, we only have so much thought process that we can actually process. And if you take some of that away from you to think about something else or anything like that, it actually is a disadvantage for you when you're actually playing, because now it's your focus is in two different places and you can't actually do that.
Yeah.
As much as everyone thinks they have unlimited focus. We really don't. And that's where the crash will come in, is if your focus is too, what we call is too broad. We either say it's too broad or too narrow. And too narrow is you're missing different things on the screen. And you've probably been there where you're too focused on, maybe your character or anything like that, and you miss something. That means your focus is a little too narrow. If it gets too broad, then people that walk behind you or something like that, then you're focusing on what they're doing and not focusing on the game. So you have to make sure that it's kind of a broad, narrow. That's what we always say in sports psychology, broad, narrow, where again, you can get everything that's on the screen that you need to. And so you don't want to actually allow the sensories to come in. You want to be where you need to be. Okay. So you want to get into the flow.
I mean, like, there are like times after the flow state where people do go through like I think we were talking about this earlier too, where they essentially go through they go through like their high they're hitting, and they go to their lows, and now they stay there for a while, and they can't go back into that zone anymore. They've essentially like lost that feel, and they can't really like feel that high ever again, or it's just like. And
it's really tough to get into a pure flow, and when we look at it purely from a sports psychology perspective, it's really the your arousal level. So what we're looking at is how aroused do you need to be, or how low do you need to be. So arousal is on a continuum, and if you go over too far from that arousal, so you get too hyped up or anything like that, you can actually go too far, and your focus and your thought process can go a little bit over. If you're under, so you've probably seen it where you're just kind of not into it, you just woke up or something like that, and the first couple of games aren't the greatest, it's because your arousal level hasn't hit the perfect optimal zone that you actually need to be in. And then there's a little range in there that's where you always actually play the best. And you probably know that right before a match or anything like that, you always kind of feel right where you need to be, and you always feel about the same, and that's where you want to be. But again, if you go over, then it seems like you're almost pushing too much. You're a little too anxious, you're too little excited, and it doesn't seem like it works out very well, does it?
Oh gosh, no. Yeah, you just crash. Yeah. You won't go back there, like, at least for a while. And so I have another question. I have a friend who recently actually just got through, he went to a major, placed 9th place, right outside the cusp of making a lot of money, but essentially that loss really set him back, and he's at the point right now where he hasn't been able to play games again, or he hasn't been able to get into that zone. He doesn't feel like his results are really there. So is there's like a method that you know of? Like, I have a few methods myself, but that are much more effective than most?
It's really interesting. Any kind of method that you use in kind of the sports psychology world and the gaming world and things like that is really interesting, because there isn't one that is better than the other. It's how a person utilizes it correctly for them. So there's a ton of different methods that you can use, but not all of them work for every single person. So I know we talked about how you kind of do a reflection after a win and loss, which is an amazing thing to do. And looking at those reflections allow you to kind of reflect back on either a past performance that was really good, and it kind of resets you back to thinking in that same mindset, which is an amazing technique to actually use. And for a lot of people, I think that would be a very good one. There are certain techniques that you can use where you can just, and we will call it disconnect, where you can step away from everybody to use those reflections. Again, some people after a win or a loss, they get bombarded with so many people around them.
Oh my gosh, yeah, they'll walk up to you and be like, oh yeah, you did your best, and now you have that like, oh, I just lost. Now, usually a big thing in the community is you don't talk to the guy who just lost, especially when he was close to winning. He essentially is like the first loser if he got second. So that's the whole mentality. So we just avoid him.
Yeah, and that's where some people, they don't realize where after a win or a loss, either one, I mean, sometimes you need to decompress and actually reflect on it. Some people won't even reflect. They'll just kind of suppress it or anything like that, which isn't necessarily a good thing, because you never actually learn from what you actually did before. So again, a disconnect is, again, just walking away and having a set time where you're kind of by yourself that you can reflect on either what was good or what was bad. Again, if you can look at what you did really well, it's an amazing thing to do, because you want to keep doing that, but you also have to look at what you did not so well. And those are where you actually have to learn from. And if you're not learning from those mistakes in a way, then you're never actually going to propel yourself to the next level. So that's kind of where that disconnect can take you away. A good example for you, I don't know how much time is in between matches and things like that.
Oh, that's the thing. They're fast-paced.
They're quick, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and a good example of another sport that actually uses it is a 16-second cue in tennis. Tennis is about 16 seconds between each serve. So when the serve goes and the point is over, they have about 16 seconds. And they've actually looked at taking it and breaking it up into about 4 sections. One, you have a physical response. So if you're smashing a racket or anything like that, and then you can yell out and get all of the negative energy that you want out. But then the third thing is that you have a positive talk to yourself. I got this, I can do this, this is what I have to do next. And then the fourth little section that they have into it is a kind of a routine that you have. So in tennis, they'll spin the racket or anything like that. In gaming, I don't quite know what different techniques you can do or anything like that. But they have those little things. If you could actually then do that in between each matches and stuff like that, I know it's probably a lot quicker than 16 seconds. I don't actually know how long. But that is something that a lot of people really like to do. And it kind of, again, it's the reset. It resets your focus on what you need to do. And that's where you kind of want to get back to.
I got something funny. Is there a book that you're speaking of that involves that tennis game? It's like The Art of Tennis or something like that is what it's called?
It's actually a big thing. It's all over. You can look at anywhere.
It's because we use it in Smash. So yeah, that's why I know about it. Like I took something from that, which is one of them being, we have 3 seconds on the Halo platform, which is essentially when you're respawning. And what I do is I just breathe. I essentially give myself a good amount of time to, so I use that time to like essentially chill and like calm down, but at that cost, I'm giving up invincibility frames, meaning that I will not come back safely. But at least my mental, when I go in, I'm just gonna go right into the game. But that's like one of the things all smashers at high level usually read. And I'm guessing that's the same book.
It's the same thing. Yeah. And it's a big, that's all tennis stars have done. And they've taught it for, I think it's been around for almost 30, 40 years now. But it is, and it's not something that just is stuck with tennis. And as you said, now with Smash Brothers and things like that, they're using it. It's because you can take it and use it anywhere you want. It's just really quickly 4 different things. Get the negative out, reset yourself, do a routine, and then your mental mind is actually back exactly where it needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, I wish a lot of the new players did that, because a lot of them actually, they rush back into the game. They'll do mistakes and then they'll like lose their stock within 10 to 20 seconds. And now they've made another mistake and now they're deeper in the hole.
What we were talking about before is where the crash comes is again, if your arousal level, or you're pushing too much. If you're pushing too much, then your focus is now not where it needs to be. And your arousal level is too much. And a lot of times when you start pushing, your performance goes down really quickly. And if you can't stop that, and a lot of times it goes too far, it's a snowball effect and you can't bring it back. And so if they can actually take the 2 seconds or 3 seconds that they have in the respawn, and again, as you said, just kind of even take a deep breath, hold it, and then exhale it, again, it can kind of reset their mind to, okay, now I can go back into it. So something to, again, get your mind reset instead of actually pressing all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got like one more question to me, and it has to essentially involve new players, because now a lot of them have a set way of learning the game, and like it's different for every game. So it's just like if I guess in sports, what's the best way to essentially approach a new game, like a whole new sport for yourself, to get involved and eventually get to the point where you become pro?
Practice.
So, like it's just like, yeah, you can say practice, but now how do you like essentially set this all up? You're so new to the game. But
so, and that's where it's no different than the first time you ever played a new game. How did you feel towards it? Well, everything moved really fast, didn't it? And it's kind of learning any new tasks. Right away, you have to learn the basics, you have to learn that, and then you have to put the time in, and then once you actually put the time in, then you can actually start to do the special moves or the new things that you want to do. And then once you actually do that, it's actually learning the techniques of the other players or the counters for everything.
Oh, then you get to make your own, since your own play style, right? Something that's your own gameplay. Yeah, it's unique to you.
Yeah, but that's the biggest thing, is it takes time to get there. And a lot of people think that, oh, I've already played this, so I can automatically go there. Well, it takes a lot of time, and I know that you've probably spent many hours of practicing.
Oh yeah, trust me. I've like I dealt with a lot of like health problems, like carpal tunnel that I had to work through, and then it's insane to think that a game like that can build you like that. And then you get to essentially learn the meta, where it's not just the game itself. Now you start to better yourself as a person when it comes to being healthy and mental.
Yeah.
That's just a lot of things too.
Yeah, and everything is kind of rolled into one, where people that just start for the first time are like, oh, well, I should be able to do that well.
Yeah, they just press the buttons and they do the same thing, but they don't know the levels to it.
Yeah, and if you talk to anybody that's at the top 100 players or anything like that, ask them how many hours that they've spent into their field, and it will be by far more than anybody else out there.
Oh yeah, I would believe you. I believe you on that. There's some people usually in my region who clock, like if you it shows you how many playtime you actually. There's some people that easily have 5 to 10,000, and an average casual player in a year would probably play maybe 600, 700 hours, and that's like, I would imagine they're playing 12 hours a day, if anything, just constantly grinding. I mean, a lot of the pros are like that too.
But that's the big difference right there. And so anybody that's coming into a new game or anything like that, they're going to have to put that time in, because if they want to go up against even somebody that's somewhat mediocre in it, they're going to lose because that person has a little bit more of the playing style and the knowledge behind it. But it just takes time. It just takes a lot of time.
Oh my God.
Did I answer all the questions?
Yeah, pretty much everything. I really hope the information I learned today helps me with like my one friend that I was talking about. Yeah, like I have another one who plays it casually, who essentially is my coach, and he's my walking journal. So I really hope I can take this, and maybe he himself will be able to help me grow as a player too.
Yeah.
That's just trying to, step on all the stairs. So
good. Yeah, and again, what you're doing right now, it sounds like you're on the right path, and that you believe that some of the stuff that you're doing actually improves your gaming and things like that, and it does. If you can actually have a clear head or anything like that before you go in or before you go into a match, you're going to be kind of, again, that focus is going to be other places. And if you have a clear mind, again, the play will get better.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah.
So, hello, my name is Stevo. I'm a student physical therapist assistant here at Kaiser University. I'm also an athlete on the esports team. I play League of Legends and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So the question I wanted to ask was, how can I ensure that I'm getting the most out of my practice time? Essentially, how can I make sure that I'm learning as much as I can with what time I have?
Okay, so it's a great question. And your question is looking at how to utilize the time efficiently, correct?
Yes.
And when we're looking at that, it doesn't matter what sport you're doing or anything like that. Again, this goes back to, if you look at the top players, they're going to put in a ton of time into whatever sport they're actually doing. But the best thing to do when we're actually looking at practice or anything like that is practice harder than you play. And you've probably heard that 100 times, but a lot of times it kind of goes by the wayside because we're like, well, I always practice really hard. But it's not necessarily just practicing harder, but it's anticipating those things. So whenever you're into a play or anything like that, a lot of times that play is a lot of times easier than your practice. It's because whenever you practice harder than you actually have the matches or anything like that, it's when you get into bad situations or you get into situations that you haven't been into a lot, that it's almost that, oh, I've already done this, it's easy. It's not a shock to your system. And I've talked about, where the focus needs to be. But again, if you're not practicing harder in practice than your actual matches, then your focus tends to be on different areas where it doesn't need to be. And that's where negative thoughts can kind of creep in, and you can have doubt, and you can be all those negative things. But if you actually practice harder than you actually play, then those thoughts can't creep in. You've already been through it. It's kind of like second nature. And again, it allows your thought process to do what it needs to do. You've trained your thought to anticipate all these different moves, so that's what you actually want it to do.
Okay. So when you say practice harder than you play, do you mean give it your 100% all the time, or give it the 110% in that practice?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people always say, give it 110%. What's that mean?
Right. I've always imagined just push yourself, right? Do the best as you can, push yourself as hard as you can, and try to play the best.
And that's what a lot of people, again, give 110%. You can't really do it. Once you're giving 100%, you're giving 100%.
Right.
And if you come in every day and you give 100% and you learn from what you actually did, that is what you want to do. A lot of times if you give 110%, of that extra 10%, people start to push on. And when you start to push, you start to rush, you start to do all those things, it's actually not clean. And if you're not practicing clean, then you're going to make the mistakes when you're actually in the game. So that's a big thing that a lot of people overlook, is just the basic fundamentals, playing a clean game, playing those things. If you're not doing that in practice, you're not going to do it in your match. And there's a lot of players that will probably do that, is they'll just get in and they'll just play, and playing is different than practicing. And you probably have to do that all the time. You can play all the time, and that's a lot different. But once you get into practice, there's different things that you need to strategize or that you need to understand or learn about the game, and that's practice. And you put a lot of time and effort and thought process in that. And if you're actually giving that your all and learning all of those different strategies, then again, once you get into the matches, that'll actually be, again, second nature.
Can you explain practice clean a little bit?
So when we're looking at that, it's the fundamentals. In sports or anything like that, it's again learning how to throw a ball correctly. A lot of people know how to throw a ball, but if you don't actually know how to throw it efficiently, you're wasting a lot of energy. And so it's just the same if you actually look at any esports that you're actually doing. A lot of people know how to play the games, but again, it's the most efficient way to actually do it. And that's kind of what you want to do. And that's kind of that clean game. And if you're practicing those techniques and practicing those strategies and practicing them perfectly, then again, once you actually get into the matches and stuff like that, then it's again, second nature. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At what point do you start getting diminishing returns on your practice?
And it's a good question. When we look at that, it's again, when you start to practice and you start to have the mental fatigue, or with that mental fatigue, if you're actually making mistakes while you're actually practicing. And a lot of times gamers, and you know this, they'll spend 12 hours a day playing. Well, is that 12 hours a day actually being efficient when they actually play, or are they making mistakes while they do it? Are they mentally fatigued? And a lot of times they'll actually push through that mental fatigue because they think it's actually important. But you don't necessarily want to actually have that mental fatigue. You don't want to have the mistakes because, again, as I said, you want to practice cleanly. And practice cleanly is, again, practicing without the mistakes. Because if you're making mistakes while you practice, you're going to make mistakes while you actually play the match in the game. And so that's what you want to stay away from. So when you start to have a mental fatigue or anything like that, again, taking a break to actually allow your body really to actually come back to really normality, what it should be. And again, getting yourself centered again.
Okay. So then I kind of want to ask on from there. To avoid mental fatigue, you want to avoid it completely, correct? You don't want to actually reach mental fatigue?
Yeah, mental fatigue is something that you want to stay away from. And again, any stress that you put on your body will give you mental fatigue. And if you don't deal with the mental fatigue and you keep adding on stress, again, at some point your mind, your body will actually shut down. And so if you continually having mental fatigue and you don't deal with it and you don't do anything to correct it, your body will shut down and your thought process will become a little bit slower. And so that's what you want to stay away from. So you want to stay away from those things. And again, there's certain times where you have to just kind of step back and actually just reset yourself. And that's where you're getting away from that mental fatigue.
So how would you go about resetting yourself?
There's a lot of different inventories that you could do. Again, it can even be taking 5 minutes, taking a step away, doing a couple of breathing exercises, reflecting on the game, things like that. Anything to kind of just eliminate some of the mental fatigue that's been put on you. So again, anything that just kind of disconnects you away from it for a few seconds. It doesn't even have to be 5 minutes. It could be, again, a couple minutes. That is all you really need to do. I guess some people, that's all they have to do.
Right. So I want to ask about this. I know earlier you were talking about getting into the zone. Is there a way to get into the zone while you're practicing?
Yeah, there is. Again, the zone is, again, an optimal level of, I guess, optimal level of arousal. You're in this perfect zone where nothing's really bothering you. Your focus is exactly where it needs to be. And so a lot of times you want to practice. So have you ever been really in the flow where you remember it perfectly?
Yes.
So if you want to, you have to think back on that day. And you could probably almost think of it perfectly, can't you? Or even that match. You can almost remember every little detail that happened during that match, and then your anticipation and kind of your whole mental state, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it almost seems like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you want to do is you actually want to think about that and then replicate it. And so that's really what you want to do. And in practice, think about that best performance. Okay, what happened, that whole day? Actually look back through the whole day. Did it get you up to being able to just go into the flow? And can you actually now replicate that? And that's really what you want to do. Or is it just one thing that puts you right into the flow? Well, if it's just that one thing, that's easy enough. All you have to do is take that piece out, and then every day when you're actually playing a match, just redo that and reset yourself. So yeah, there is a way to do it. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, getting into the flow is actually extremely hard to do. But if you can practice getting in there during practice and things like that, then again, once you get into the match, it's just like second nature for you. And that's what you really want to do.
Okay. That was really good. I guess I want to ask, can you be in the flow too much?
Do you mean too long
Yeah,
or
too
just
long.
too often?
Like let's say I am in the flow like too much, like too often. Too often I'm just getting in the flow just to play games, stuff like that. Is that gonna affect me negatively?
Not necessarily. Again, when you're in a match or anything like that, a lot of times to stay in that, it takes a lot of effort to be able to be in there. Again, you have to kind of let yourself go in a way to be able to get there. You can't necessarily do it too often, but sometimes it's hard to stay in that because, again, the attention and where your focus is, once your focus kind of goes off just a little bit, then it'll take you away from the flow. And that's where it gets really hard to stay in there. But you can't be in it too much.
Okay.
And a lot of times, again, the practice, if you can practice and being in the flow a lot, it just makes it so much easier once you actually get into the competition. So it's not like you can do it too often.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what you want to do is practice to get into it.
So thank you very much for answering all my questions today.
Yeah. No problem. Again, a lot of the up and coming younger guys, the best advice that I could probably give is, again, don't let the negative self-talk get you down. A lot of times you will reflect back on some of the performances that you have. Again, don't necessarily hinder yourself by continually saying negative things to yourself. Switch that negative things and start saying positive things to yourself so that you can actually overcome some of the bad opportunities that you actually have. That negative self-talk will push you through and will actually help you in the long run.